Week 4 NFL Power Rankings, and how this year has gone so far, I don't know of a fan base that can be sane right now. Maybe the Seahawks and the Vikings and a couple of the undefeated teams feel that, but man, this is chaos turning on its head. Through week 1, it looked like chalk. It looked good. I mean, there were very few upsets. Normally, 2/3 of the games go to the favorite, 1/3 go to the underdog. Week 1, it was like 14% went to the underdog. So it was very chalk. And then all of a sudden you get to week 2 and week 3, and this year is everything's flipped upside down, crazy topsy-turvy. Nothing makes sense. All of a sudden you got Red Rifle playing in Carolina, looking like he's revitalized. And not only that, like Carolina could actually be a contender. Like, what's happening? And anybody who thought there would be no teams with without a win in the NFC, and that the only two teams with undefeated record would be Minnesota and Seattle, flat out lying to you. Like, it's just, this is upside, this flipsy, flopsy, topsy-turvy. This is a crazy year so far. So, with that, I guarantee there's going to be some unhappy people with power rankings on any platform today. I blew the whole thing up. We'll get to that. But 7 in my rankings, 7 from the AFC, 7 from the NFC. Always in my top 14. Because those 14 teams will make the playoffs. So 7 from the AFC, 7 from the NFC. And normally the AFC looks stronger. Like they should have 8 or 9 teams in the 14 playoff. This year, the NFC looks like it's the stronger conference. So it's a little bit wild this year. I'm very excited to see how this unfolds. Let's look at the rankings first. There's your rankings. Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Kansas City, all undefeated. Buffalo looking like a juggernaut last night. Then you got Minnesota and Seattle as the only undefeated teams in the NFC, with New Orleans looking incredibly potent on offense. It's just, and then Dallas and San Francisco at 1-2 records. And then on the other side, the Bengals are defeated. Like, this is just a crazy, topsy-turvy season. And I decided for my rankings this week, I'm just going to blow it all up. We're just starting from scratch. Normally I do a farthest riser, biggest faller, and I'm not doing that this week. I'm just going to go straight into starting from scratch. Where do we stand right now? So starting at number 32, I'm putting the Jaguars down there. I'm not going to give a ton of analysis and basis on this video. I'm going to let this one roll through. You guys can make your deductions where you see your deductions. But the Jaguars are my 32 ranked team this year after Carolina pulled off what they did. Then you got the Titans at 31. Whooped up on by the Jets, Bears, and Packers so far this year. Big opportunity with the Dolphins coming up. I think they can right the ship there. Then you've got the Panthers, who finally pull off a win. Still got on the lower half of the rankings because, I mean, they got slaughtered by the Saints, slaughtered by the Chargers, and then out of nowhere, you switch your quarterback. Red Rifle comes in, and it looks like, well, maybe there's some hope here. But how much of that was on the Raiders? I don't know. So the Bengals at 0-3, will the Bengals right the ship, or will the Panthers show that they are actually legit with Red Rifle? This is going to be fun to watch. I mean, this is really going to be a fun season to watch how this unfolds. Number 29, I'm putting the Raiders, and I know Raiders fans won't be happy with this. They look so good against the Ravens, but then how do you justify what they just did to the Panthers? And I know the Panthers beat them, and the Panthers should be 29, Raiders should be 30, but guys, I blew it all up. I'm telling you, I think the Raiders are a better team than the Panthers, and they get a chance to right the ship against the Browns this week. I have no clue who the worst team in football is going to be this year. I think a lot of people can agree with that. At 28, I've got the Giants, and really, I thought about putting them at 30, and probably a lot of you guys agree with that. But then you look at, they beat the Browns. That's not saying a lot, and you're going to see the Browns I have above them. This is so chaotic this year. But then their 2 losses look better than they did before. The Commanders look legitimate. They lost to the Commanders, and they lost to the Vikings. So was it really just playing tougher competition, or are the Giants actually good? Because they played the Commanders close, and they lost, or then they beat the Browns. Now they got the Cowboys, the 1-2 Cowboys. 1-2 against 1-2 Giants and Cowboys coming up this week. That's who saw that coming? Patriots at number 27 just shows why this whole thing is topsy-turvy. They beat the Bengals, and at the time it looked like a quality win. The Bengals are 0-3 now, but the Bengals played well last night. I don't know, guys. I really don't know. So they beat the Bengals. Then they lose in overtime to the Seahawks, who are also 3-0, but then get slaughtered by the Jets. All right, so now the crazier part. Now they get to face all the way across the country. They got to go all the way across the country to San Francisco to play the Niners, who are also both 1-2. What a wild start to the season. Same scenario at 26, and man, am I going to be watching this game on Sunday because the Broncos lost to the Steelers 13-6. The Steelers defense looking really tough, so you can understand why they only put 6 up. But then they lost to the Seahawks 26-20. Seahawks undefeated. But then they go and slaughter the Buccaneers, who are looking so strong. They lose to them, or they beat them 26-7. And now they get to face the Jets, the 2-1 Jets, who I have still a lot of question marks about. And if the Broncos go in to New Jersey and beat the Jets, I don't know how much more topsy-turvy this season can be, because the Broncos by many were picked to be number 32 at the end of this year. But if they can go in and beat the Jets, this spins the whole thing upside down. And I think it's very, very possible they can go in and beat the Jets. That's going to be one of my games to watch this week. The Browns at 25, I self-admit this is one where I've got in the complete wrong spot. It's just the defensive talent on this team makes me say they should be better than a 1-2 team. Well, now they face the Commanders, who I would have thought at the beginning of the season, before the season started playing out at all, the Commanders would easily beat the Browns would beat the Commanders, but now there's no way I think the Commanders lose to the Browns. So after this week, it'll be kind of solidifying where the Browns really are, and the Browns to me look like a team that's probably going to be heading for 30, 31, or 32. That's just an opinion. But really, to start the season, the defense of the Browns should have carried them, and they've got enough offensive weapons. They shouldn't be down at 25. They shouldn't be down even being considered 30, 31, and 32. But here they are at 25, and I fully expect them to be on that bottom line, 29, 30, 31, 32 next week. All right, same scenario at 24. This is why I had to scrap the whole thing and start it all over again. As 24, you've got the Dolphins beating the Jaguars to start the season, but now you're missing Tua and the whole team. If you look at last week at the Seahawks, I mean, that was a train wreck. Now, the Seahawks defense looked really, really good last week. So that's more to play for it, but now they face the number 31 Titans this week at home. If they don't beat the Titans, they need to fall below the Titans. So the same scenario as the Browns. They could easily be on that bottom road near the bottom, right there by the Jaguars by the end of this week. This is a week where everything got blown up, but next week and into week 5, 6, 7, you should start seeing some reasons as to why teams are actually where they're listed, and it'll start taking more shape. Okay, 23 I know is going to upset a lot of America's team fans. They're not America's team anymore, but the Cowboys. I'm not a Cowboys hater. I had them ranked very high to start the season, but they beat the Browns. Good for them. They beat the Browns, but then slaughtered by the Saints. A close game to the Ravens, but here's why I have them ranked so low, guys. They're now going in to face the Giants. If they lose to the Giants, it'll be disastrous. But then after that, you've got the Steelers, the Lions, the Niners, the Falcons, the Eagles, and the Texans all in a row. This was not a good year for the Cowboys to start 1-2. And if they don't turn the ship around really quick, they're going to stick right in this 23 range all season long. And for a team this talented on offense and defense, that's a crazy thought. 22, I've got the Packers. I don't have anything else to say about that except the Packers are frauds. They're one of the biggest jokes of teams in the NFL. They beat the Titans. They beat the Colts, sure. But they got beat by the Eagles on a game they should have easily won, except they have one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks in the NFL in Jordan Love. Now Malik Willis steps in and shows that it has nothing to do with quarterback play. It's all Matt LaFleur. But when it comes down to these tight games, when they actually start playing tough teams like this week against the Vikings, they're going to get their butts handed to them. The talent will overcome the good coaching, and this mediocre, lackluster talent of a team will be exposed for what they are. At 21, you've got the 0-3 Bengals, and I have nothing to do to defend them. They've just got to right the ship. If they want to come out of the gutter, I'm being favorable to them, only putting them at 21 when they're 0-3 and they've lost the way they have. I mean, coming out the beginning of the year against very poor teams and losing, but then last night it looked a little bit better. I mean, it looked better, but they still aren't putting the wins together. So 21's a fair spot for the Bengals. Bears at 20 are a team with piss-poor coaching. Terrible, terrible play calls, scheme, but with talent oozing out the eyeballs. Top 10 talent in the entire league, but if you don't coach it properly, if you don't get it together and play call the right stuff, you're going to go into games like last week against the Colts, where they should have easily won that game, and they didn't win that game. And if you play the Colts 10 times, you probably beat the Colts 9 times, but you have horrible coaches calling sweep options on 4th and goal after you've already shotgun snapped handoffs 3 plays in a row. It's just bizarre what's happening in Chicago. Hopefully they right the ship. If not, I mean, they've got an easy schedule coming up where they should win the majority of the next 4 or 5 games. If they don't, they'll be right down there with the Jaguars at 32. 19, you've got the Colts, who just beat the Bears, and that's the only reason you can put them there at 19. Really looking off, out of sync. A lot of teams are picking on them with the run defense. Why the Bears didn't, I don't know. It looks like they corrected the ship a little bit. A lot of injuries, a lot of inaccuracy on offense. They've got an opportunity to right it right now. A talented team that almost made the playoffs last year. I don't see them rising much above this unless there's big changes that happen. At 18, I've got the Rams, who I had as a playoff team as well to start the year. Injuries are unfortunate. They played really well against the Niners, though, so I had them dropping farther, and then all of a sudden they come back and beat the Niners. That shows how important coaching can be. Now you got 18 and 20, Bears and Rams facing off this week, with one of them being able to change the direction of their season. Who's it going to be? I don't know. That's a 50-50 game to me. Cardinals at 17. This is a little higher than most people will rank them, but I saw a lot of things I liked in their losses as well to the Bills. Played the Bills tight. Played the Lions tight, and then blew out the Rams 41-10. It's just a matter of whether they can get in cohesion and get going. This will be a good opportunity for them this week against the Commanders, a big matchup that a lot of people probably want to watch that one after what Jaden Daniels did last week. So this will be a fun one to watch, which leads me into number 16, the Commanders. No, it's just fun that they face off this week, and we put it that way, but the Commanders barely beat the Giants, which made it look, I mean, that was the game where I think they kicked 7 field goals in that game. And then they beat the Bengals last night in a game that was just a shootout. Nobody was punting in that game. So a shootout, and their only loss now is to the Buccaneers, who saw the Commanders being 2-1. Now they get to go all the way across the country to Arizona to face the Cardinals. This one will be a big determining factor as well. I mean, this is a big matchup week for all these teams. A lot of proper matchups for teams trying to right the course. None of these crazy underdog upset stories like last week. This is really close contested matchups of teams that are pretty equally facing each other. So this will be a fun one as well. All right, so here's where I might get the most flack from fans. The Seahawks defense looked great last week, but think about who the Seahawks have beat so far. They beat the Broncos, they beat the Patriots, and now they beat the Tua-less Dolphins, who came all the way across the country to Seattle. So I understand, 100%, I understand why some Seahawk fans might be upset with me not putting them in the playoff rankings, especially when they're 3-0. But now they get a true test where they actually have to face a playoff contender team in the Lions. This will be a very true test to see how, if the Seahawks are really a 3-0 team, and they have to go to Detroit. So 3-0 Seahawks against 2-1 Lions, but really, that should be a heavy favorite for the Lions because the Seahawks really haven't, and that's a Monday Night Football game. So the Seahawks haven't really played a tough opponent yet. So it's one of those where they got the easy schedule to start the season off. But still going to be a big test to really prove and show what kind of team they really are. All right, on to the playoff teams. Remember, 7 AFC, 7 NFC. And like I said before when the video was starting, there's really only, there's not 7 AFC teams right now that I feel like are playoff teams. So if you're asking me, do the Chargers seem like a playoff team? No, they don't. But there's not really 7 AFC teams that I would put in the top 14 right now. There's a couple teams like the Seahawks that I'd like to squeak in, but I got to do 7 AFC, 7 NFC. So I'm putting the Chargers in there. Lost to the Steelers, beat the Panthers, beat the Raiders. That's not very convincing. And now they face the Chiefs. And this is really just out of necessity having to put an AFC team up into the playoffs. The NFC is looking like the more dominant conference finally. It's weird. Finally, that's where it stands. 13, I've got the Ravens, same situation. The Ravens, man, they picked a wrong time to start the season the way they did. 1-2, they needed to beat the Raiders. Losing to the Chiefs was acceptable, but they almost won that game by a toe. They lost that game, and then they come back and squeak out a win against the Cowboys. It was a bigger difference than it looked like, and the Cowboys came back at the end. But now they got to face the Bills and the Bengals and the Commanders. Very easily, the Ravens could be dropping out of the playoff predictions, and be a team that could be 1-4, 1-5. Like, this could get wild for Ravens fans very shortly. There's some teams that are emerging and flipping things upside down. At number 12, I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not a lot that needs to be explained there. They've played really well to start the season. Just a little bit of a hiccup against the Broncos. I don't have an explanation for why that one happened, but knocking off the Commanders, knocking off the Lions, still earns them in one of the top spots for the NFC. I have them as the 7th seed right now for the NFC, and the crazy thing about that is I have so many NFC South teams. I got 3 NFC South teams in the playoffs right now, and that's absolutely bizarre because we thought maybe one would squeak in to start the year. But the Saints look like a team that could really contend. Offensive juggernauts week 1 and 2, and granted that's against the Panthers, but then against the Cowboys it looked more solid because the Cowboys have a decent defense, but then played the Eagles tight, 15-12. Where did the offense go? I don't know. We'll see if they can recover it and get it back against the Falcons this week. And that's, again, one of our key matchups. The Falcons play the Saints. We see 10 and 11 as it stands right now in my rankings. 10 and 11 face off against each other. This will be a fun one to watch. Yes, the Falcons are only 1-2, and I've got them in the rankings. I get that. But the Falcons did lose to the Steelers. They beat the Eagles, and then they lost to the Chiefs in all really good games. So this will be a big one to see who the Falcons really are as they face the Saints this week. And then they get to face the Buccaneers. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this 10, 11, 12 spot with the Falcons, with the Saints, with the Buccaneers. Things, like I said at the beginning, things start eventuating. They start showing themselves week 5, 6, 7, 8. As you get to midseason, then you get a real taste of what teams look like and where they should really be ranked. Number 9, I've got the New York Jets, and they're probably a little bit higher than they should be. I'm going to be very fair. It's probably a little bit higher than they should be, but they did look really good, dominant. They commanded themselves really well against the Patriots. Aaron Rodgers is leading it to look like the offense that we all expected it could be, and then the defense picked up as well. So looks really good for the Jets right now. I think it's a fair spot for them to be the 5-ish seed in the AFC. They do face, I believe, the Broncos this week, but then they have to face the Vikings. So there'll be some tests coming up. We'll see how they shake out. Another 1-2 team in the top of my rankings. San Francisco, I believe, is a great team still, and they show that. They slaughtered the Jets week 1, but then they lost to the Vikings, who are looking like a defensive powerhouse. I mean, they look like the whole thing has been put together, and coaching is showing so much at the beginning of the season. All these teams and where they rank, coaching is really the key to the beginning of the 2024 year. Coaching has been the difference with all of this. But then last week's win, they had it underway against the Rams, and then the Rams came back and beat them. I'm not going to crucify them too hard for that, but if they can't put it together this week against the Patriots, they definitely don't deserve to be in the top. This should be an easy win, and then they face the Cardinals and the Seahawks. They got an opportunity here to string some together after a couple tough losses. The Lions did beat the Cardinals, but I've still got them at number 7 just because some other teams showed so much that they jumped ahead of them. But I'm very high on the Lions. I think they'll be a top 5 team to end the year. I think they'll be in the NFC Championship game. Facing the Seahawks at home this week, that'll do well to show how legitimate the Lions are. Then they face the Cowboys and the Vikings. So good opportunity for the Lions. Nothing looks bad for the Lions so far. A tough loss to the Buccaneers and an overtime win against the Rams. But then they beat the Cardinals last week. I think the Lions are just slow and steady. I think they'll be fine through the year. 10-plus win team for sure. And they very well could and should be in the NFC Championship game. I had to move the Texans down just a little bit after the beatdown they got from the Vikings, and it was a beatdown, 34-7. It was, and they exposed C.J. Stroud. I don't think it's permanent I think he's a great quarterback, but they did expose him, and they showed how good the Vikings defense is more than anything. The Texans haven't had a true test yet. They won't really this week either against the Jaguars. But then they got to face the Bills next week. So that'll be fun to see. That's a big matchup. But I had to drop the Texans down a little bit after that loss, especially how bad of a loss that was to the Vikings. All right, Eagles have played tough all year. I've moved them back up into the top 5. After the first week, I thought they might be overrated because they allowed the fraud Packers to be able to be close with them. But that was all the way across the world in Brazil. So you can give a little bit of excuse for that because teams, when you're traveling that far, you can play crappy against really, really terrible bottom-of-the-barrel crap opponents like the Packers. So I give them a little bye. They still came away with the win, and a win is a win. Then they lost to the Falcons by 1 and righted the ship by holding the Saints to 12 points last week. They've got a tough stretch coming up with just tough game with the Buccaneers. That'll really give us an idea, 5 against 12 here, where the Vikings or where the Eagles stand as they face the Buccaneers, and that will be in Tampa Bay, so that'll be fun. Steelers at number 4, they're 3-0, one of the best defenses in the entire NFL, and Justin Fields proving me right that I knew what I was talking about with analyzing him as a quarterback. I don't see anything really stopping them from beating the Colts this week, especially with their good run game. Justin Fields should expose the Colts by himself. Add in Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. They're going to be fine, and throw some passes in there just for fun, get Justin Fields a couple touchdowns. I think the Steelers will stay firm right there at number 4. And then at number 3, the newcomer, you're going to have the Vikings, who have shown they are here for real. Kevin O'Connell, the defense, they beat the Giants by 20-plus points. They beat the Niners by a touchdown. Then they slaughtered the Texans. Now they face the pitiful Packers this week. I see another 20, 30-point victory this week against the Packers. The Packers are coached well, but they don't have the talent that the Vikings do. So this should be another slaughter, blowout. The Packers have one of the worst secondaries in the league, and the Vikings obviously have threats galore on offense. So this will be a fun one to watch the Packers get beat down if you don't like the Packers. Then you got the Bills. Last night, the game was over in the first 2 minutes of the game. 3-0 as well. Another 3-0 team. And now they have to face the Ravens in Baltimore. This will be a fun one to see if the Ravens can right the ship or if the Bills continue to lay it on and just pound away at their opponents. So far, the Bills are looking really, really good. And that leaves at number 1, you've got the Kansas City Chiefs, of course. Can't take the Chiefs out of number 1 because they're defending Super Bowl champions and they're 3-0, but I do think the Bills and the Vikings have looked better this year. So any mix-up or goof-up by the Chiefs this year, and they will be moving down because I really do think the Bills and the Vikings so far are looking like the toughest teams. Chiefs are going to have the Chargers this week in San Diego. That's a divisional game, so it could be a tough one. There could be an upset brewing there. And then you got the Saints, who's been very high-powered, then the Niners. So this is going to be fun to see how that goes. All right, let me know what you guys think. New videos out each Tuesday for Power Rankings, each Wednesday for the weekly predictions. Give me your thoughts on which rankings I got wrong. I did blow the entire thing up this year. Started from scratch because we're through a 1/6 of the season, and everything is chaos. I appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and good luck to all your teams this week.